You're standing there and suddenly someone fires a question your way, calls your character into doubt, questions your motives, or challenges your competence. In that split second, almost everyone does the predictable thing: they defend themselves. I didn't mean it like that. That's not what I was trying to say. You misunderstood. It feels like the right move, polite, reasonable, almost noble. But Machiavelli saw it for what it really is. The moment you admit weakness, you hand the power to your accuser. When you jump to justify, you've already lost. The act of defense implicitly signals that you needed defending, so to onlookers, you look vulnerable. In every power play, perception is the battlefield. If your adversary sees you flinch, they don't pity you, they mark you as prey. As Machiavelli put it, the person who shirks defense forces everyone else to defend them instead, which means you never seize the narrative. Defending yourself rarely sways an audience. What it does is shift the frame of the argument onto the other person's turf. By explaining, you accept their premise that they have authority to judge you. Even if you're perfectly in the right, you end up looking guilty because society instinctively sees excuses as evidence of guilt. Meanwhile, the strong-led accusations hover in silence, turning every attempt to vilify into an opportunity to expose emotional weakness. Control isn't won with clarity. Clarity belongs in therapy. In the arena of power, you want control. In fact, the less you explain, the more you retain dominance. When accused of arrogance or selfishness, your instinct might be to plead your case. No, you don't understand, but that reaction proves you care. It hands your critic the ball, inviting them to volley again, trapping you in an endless loop of justifications. Instead, picture this: someone calls you arrogant. You don't blink. You keep breathing, let the words hang in the air, and then you move on. You don't apologize or clarify. You simply refuse to legitimize the attack. That silence is your counterattack. It forces your accuser to rethink: why isn't he bothered? Does he know something I don't? Is he so confident that my words can't reach him? You flip the power, turning their aggression into uncertainty. Machiavelli understood that the one who controls the frame controls the outcome. Speaking first in self-defense is a fatal error. It cedes the stage. Instead, you wield silence like a blade. When accusations fly, you let them echo without interference. You turn the mirror back on your attacker. Interesting that you'd say that you might murmur, voice steady, before changing the subject. Their words then become a revelation of their own biases, not a stain on your reputation. Most people think they can reason or out-talk an opponent. They believe if they just explain enough, they'll emerge vindicated. But that approach betrays emotional investment, not strategic mastery. The truly powerful know that forcing others to fill the silence is far more disarming than any rebuttal. You don't validate their judgments. You expose their need for drama. Imagine walking into a room where someone launches a subtle jab at you, maybe a slight about your strategy or a whisper about your character. All eyes turn, waiting for your reaction. You offer none. No denial, no retort. Just calm presence. In that moment, you become untouchable. People begin questioning the jab itself. Why didn't he respond? Does he see something we don't? You've shifted the focus from the accusation to the accuser's uncertainty. This is the art of frame control. Silence, when wielded with presence, speaks volumes. It suggests that you hold a perspective so unshakable that no amount of criticism can rattle you. That's the first layer of Machiavellian power: never defend, always observe. Let others chase echoes and explanations while you stand firm. You lean back in your chair and watch the room shift, all because you refuse to engage. Now ask yourself what happens when a friend or a stranger tries the same trick in more intimate arenas. Romantic relationships, family gatherings, digital debates. The script remains unchanged. Their accusation is the opening gambit. Your silence is the knockout punch. When someone tells you, "You don't care about me anymore," the instinct is to launch into reassurances, saying, "You do care," explaining why you've been distant, promising change. But each word you utter hands them control. Instead, hold still. Let the air thicken with their own doubt. Allow them to feel the full weight of their drama. Then, in a single measured phrase, "That's not how I see it," you reclaim the stage. No defense, just a grounded assertion. Their emotional crescendo becomes a flat line against your calm. In business meetings, the tactic scales just as effectively. Picture a boardroom, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A colleague quietly undercuts your proposal. I'm not sure that plan is thought through. Every manager in the room anticipates your response. Instead, you sit silent, hands folded, a flicker of mild interest passing through your gaze. The tension shifts from your competence to the colleague's audacity. Then, almost lazily, you ask, "What metrics would you suggest we revisit?" Suddenly, your critic must justify their own position, and the room evaluates their insight, not your idea. You've redirected the energy without ever admitting a flaw. This is deflection, the second instrument in your arsenal. Unlike raw silence, deflection actively reframes the accusation without granting it validity. It forces your adversary to fight on unfamiliar turf. They thought they'd baited you into defense. Instead, they're left scrambling for a new target. Perhaps you echo a simple challenge. Help me understand your concern, and watch as they stumble unprepared to lead the conversation back to your perceived weakness. Then there's the precision cut, a short, sharp statement that ends debates instantly. Someone says, "You think you're better than everyone else." You reply, "Confidence unsettles the insecure." No apology, no concession, just a status assertion. You're not defending, you're elevating. You're telling the world you're operating by different rules. They threw a dagger and you answered with steel. In personal conflicts, these tactics become almost surgical. Imagine your partner accuses you of neglect. Instead of weaving a web of explanations about workload, stress, and time management, you remain still, let the silence stretch, then say simply, "That's surprising to hear." That phrase, neutral yet detached, invites them to reconsider their frame. Perhaps they projected their own anxieties rather than reflecting your intentions. You haven't dismissed their feelings, but you haven't surrendered your narrative either. Machiavelli studied the anatomy of conflict and boiled it down to one bitter truth: words aren't for clarity, they're for control. When you refuse to clarify, you pull the rug out from under anyone who tries to pin you down. They have no stable target. Their accusations bounce off an invisible shield. And as they collide and ricochet, your composure remains unscathed. Online, the battlefield multiplies. Social media comment sections, direct messages, blog posts, you can't defend every slur or misinterpretation. You drown in explanation. Instead, you employ narrative dominance. Someone calls you toxic. You don't rebut. You retweet or repost with a caption like, "Only the threaten label power as toxicity." You haven't addressed the claim directly, but you've inserted a stronger narrative that neutralizes the attack and rallies your supporters. Their criticism becomes a badge of strength. The crowd then becomes your unwitting advocates. They correct the record for you, fill the silence with defenses on your behalf, and amplify your message. You didn't ask them to, you simply didn't respond. And now, instead of defending, you're being defended. That's the ultimate leverage, using the energy of your critics to amplify your own influence. Consider the third tool in your Machiavellian toolkit, aura. It's the quiet power that comes from consistent use of silence, deflection, and precision cuts. Over time, you cultivate a reputation not for being right, but for being unassailable. Accusations fade before they land. The mere possibility of questioning you feels risky. People hesitate to attack because they know they'll expose their own insecurities. To build aura, you must train yourself to resist the tug of immediate reaction. Practice holding silence in low-stakes scenarios. A casual critique from a barista, an offhand remark from a stranger. Notice the discomfort on their face as you don't defend. Notice how they deflate, searching for an explanation that never comes. Each instance reinforces your unshakable presence. Next, integrate deflection into everyday speech. When someone remarks on your workload, "You always seem so busy," don't explain your schedule. Instead, ask them what they'd do with your challenges. They'll shift from critique to self-assessment, and you stay in command. Finally, master precision cuts. Prepare a handful of status assertions, short declarative lines you can deploy when under fire. Ambition unsettles complacency. Criticism reveals fear. Silence disrupts the needy. Use them sparingly but with confidence. Each one lands like a scalpel, separating emotional aggression from substantive dialogue. Remember, the goal isn't to be cruel or dismissive without cause. It's to preserve your strategic advantage by refusing to validate attacks. When someone tries to bait you, they're testing boundaries. Your lack of reaction establishes a new boundary. You don't play by the same rules. There will be moments when you choose to speak, but when you do, it must be purposeful. A power move, not a reaction. Your words should shape the field, not respond to it. Ask questions that turn the focus back on your accuser. Make them the one who has to explain, to perform, to justify. While they scramble, you observe. You're not on trial, they are. In group settings, this approach breeds allies. People gravitate toward composed strength. When they see you remain unflappable, they feel safer under your umbrella. They'll instinctively defend you, echo your phrases, and shield you from further attacks. Without lifting a finger, you build a protective network. That network amplifies your reputation further. Outsiders see your accusers fall silent and assume power lies with you. They approach you cautiously, ready to handshake with someone who never defends because they sense there's nothing to challenge. Over time, the world adapts. Attacks that once would have been hurled now vanish altogether. People assume you'll ignore them. You become that untouchable figure. Machiavelli celebrated someone so secure in presence that challenges simply evaporate. This is not manipulation for its own sake. It's strategic self-preservation. It's the realization that every defense is a concession and every concession is a loss. You keep your secrets and your power by revealing as little as possible. So when next confronted, remember, silence is weapon, deflection is strategy, precision is art. Never defend, dictate, never explain, assert, never react, command. Now let's go even deeper into the coldest maneuver of all, the act of inversion. This is where the psychological game flips entirely, and instead of deflecting an accusation, you make it bounce back onto the one who threw it, not with force, but with indifference. Someone calls you manipulative. You don't bristle, you don't correct. You smile faintly and say, if that's how you see it, it sounds harmless, passive even. But what just happened is surgical. That calm detachment ruins them. Because they were expecting heat, they wanted friction, they came looking for an emotional reaction to validate their suspicion, and instead, you handed them a mirror. Now they're left holding their own assumption with no conflict to make it feel real. And it's in that vacuum that their accusation turns against them. Suddenly they wonder if they overplayed, if they embarrassed themselves, if they look unhinged. Their confidence in the attack withers because they didn't get what they needed: resistance. And without resistance, they lose narrative traction. The scene they tried to provoke turns into an awkward pause. They squirm. The audience watches. The power balance flips. And here's the most dangerous part: you didn't lift a finger. You let their accusation die of natural causes. You let it choke on its own lack of gravity. Because the moment you showed detachment, you implied superiority. Not arrogance, but the kind of self-assurance that makes people second-guess themselves before they speak. The Machiavellian strategist understands something most people never will: silence is not passive. It's active. It's the choice to let your presence do what your words never could. It turns judgment into suspense. And in that suspense, your aura grows. It's not just about withholding reaction. It's about knowing when to become invisible. That's the next layer: disappearance. Not ghosting, not avoidance. Disappearance as a form of punishment. Someone takes a jab at you. You don't respond. You don't reply. You don't even acknowledge them. You simply disappear from the conversation. You become absence. And here's what happens: they break. Because attention, even negative attention, is validation. Even a fight means you think they're worthy of your energy. But silence. Silence says you don't exist in my world. And that destroys them. They spiral. They rant. They try to provoke again. They talk to others. They post more. They try everything to pull you back into the game, but every attempt only exposes them more, makes them look desperate, emotional, unstable. While you're still, distant, unbothered. This is what Machiavelli would call narrative erosion. You don't argue with their version of the story. You make it so boring, so one-sided, so unanswered, that even the people watching stop believing it. The crowd loses interest in drama with no tension. They stop listening to the loud voice and start wondering why the quiet one never replied. Eventually, someone speaks up. Why are you still going on about this? They haven't even said anything. And boom. Now the crowd defends you. Not because you asked them to, but because your silence made it necessary. You've become the mystery. The silence that begs to be interpreted. It's social judo. Their emotional energy flips backward and crashes on its own weight. You didn't resist their sword. You let them fall on it. But sometimes you want to do more than invert or vanish. You want to turn their accusation into a symptom of their weakness. And that's where elite verbal flips come in. These aren't comebacks. They're reframes. Someone calls you arrogant. You shrug, strange how confidence bothers the unsure. They say you're manipulative. Only people who feel powerless say that. They call you fake. That's what people say when they stop getting what they want. You're not just brushing it off. You're exposing the insecurity behind their words. Suddenly, they're the one defending themselves. They're the one justifying. They're the one explaining why they felt the need to strike in the first place. And now they look weak. This is what Machiavelli meant by flipping the blade. You never block the sword they swing, and you step aside. Their momentum carries them forward until they fall face first into the dirt they kicked up. Most people are trained to defend their name, to clear their image, to set the record straight. But Machiavelli saw this instinct as the trap it is, because the minute you try to prove your innocence, you accept the frame of guilt. And if you accept that frame, you've already lost. That's why the true power player never plays that game. They don't panic when accused. They don't chase clarity. They just become more composed, more still. They show no damage. And that restraint triggers a shift. Slowly, those trying to tear them down start to unravel. They get louder. They get sloppier. And the louder they get, the more obvious it becomes who's in control. Think about it. The more someone insists I'm not crazy, the more unstable they seem. The more someone screams, I'm not insecure, the more obvious their insecurity. But the person who says nothing, they give nothing away. That's power. It's not about being feared for the sake of fear. It's about being unreadable, because the unreadable man is the one no one can predict. And people don't attack what they can't understand. They hesitate, they calculate, and most of the time, they choose silence. Eventually, the attacks stop. Not because you won the argument, but because people realize they can't win. Not with you, not against your stillness, not against your mystery. And so you rise not by explanation, but by elimination. They eliminate themselves, one failed accusation at a time. Now step into a crowded room, colleagues, friends, strangers. Conversation flows. Then it happens a jab. Subtle, disguised as humor. You always act like you know everything. Maybe followed by a few polite chuckles. But those words weren't neutral. They were bait. And everyone knows it. This is where most people get nervous. They laugh awkwardly, try to smooth things over, maybe toss in a self-deprecating joke to prove they're not like that. But here's the Machiavellian shift. You don't flinch. You don't even blink. You pause. Hold a full 2 seconds of silence. Scan the room with a kind of quiet curiosity, not anger, not defense, just awareness. Then if you speak at all, you do it with surgical calm. You seem emotional today. Or even better, nothing. A still gaze that lands heavier than a speech. Now the whole frame shifts. The attacker fidgets. They look around for support that doesn't come. They explain their own joke, dig deeper, grow more agitated. And suddenly the crowd isn't laughing anymore, they're wondering what just happened. Because in that silence, you made them the spectacle. Machiavelli understood this better than most. The courtroom isn't made of wood and marble. It's made of perception. In public settings, the jury isn't appointed, it's watching you at all times. And when someone throws a jab and you don't defend, the room takes notice. They listen to the silence more than they ever listen to the words. Now carry that into the digital arena where accusations come faster, louder, and more publicly. The comment section, the call-out post, the indirect sub-tweet. The world demands your reply. And here's the paradox. Machiavelli would whisper into your ear, silence can mean guilt or it can mean danger. And your job is to make it mean the latter. You don't post an apology. You don't clarify. You don't take to your stories to explain what really happened. You post a single sentence. People always call you dangerous when they can't control you. That's not a defense. That's dominance. You reframed the entire accusation into a compliment. You didn't just sidestep the blade, you turned it into a medal. Now they look bitter. You look unfazed. The audience, they're watching. And suddenly the power dynamic has flipped. They're no longer questioning you. They're questioning the one who tried and failed to shake you. That's what narrative dominance looks like. You don't just ignore the story, you rewrite the genre. Let's get precise now. There are only 3 tools you need to master this game. First, silence. Your default. Cold. Immovable. It exposes your attacker's emotional instability by comparison. It forces the world to watch who breaks first, and it's never you. Second, deflection. Not sarcasm, not defensiveness, just redirection. Someone says, "You think you're better than everyone." You reply, "I just don't think like everyone." Now they're left chasing their own logic while you move on. Third, precision cuts. Short, controlled statements that shut everything down. Someone says, "You're full of yourself." You answer, "Confidence upsets the insecure." Not angry, not mocking, just truth delivered like a scalpel. And the best part, these aren't arguments, they're assertions. You're not trying to win anyone over, you're showing you don't need to. You're saying with every breath, "I'm not here to be approved of. I'm here to be respected." That's the true Machiavellian trait. The refusal to beg. The quiet daring to be seen as the villain and to walk taller for it. Because the moment you stop defending yourself, your enemies lose their anchor. They expected to battle. Instead, they're swinging at fog. And with every move, they show more of their own insecurity. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone go off ranting, justifying, explaining, trying to prove their point? And the more they speak, the more they sink. That's the tragedy of the over-explainer. They reveal everything. They lose mystery. They lose control. But the person who just sits back, lets it unfold, and speaks only once the room is quiet again, that's the one people fear. Because mystery isn't built on answers, it's built on silence. Machiavelli didn't chase approval. He chased control. And that control doesn't come from being the most liked or even the most admired. It comes from being the one no one can pin down. The one whose actions can't be predicted. The one whose words land like thunder after a long, tense pause. You become that by being misunderstood intentionally. By allowing others to think you're cold, arrogant, hard to read, and never correcting them. Because correction is concession. It says you're right enough that I felt the need to change your mind. But mystery, it says you'll never quite know me, and that should make you nervous. So don't be afraid to let others think you're difficult, or guarded, or unapologetic. Because in their confusion, you gain space, you gain time, you gain control. And above all, you gain the upper hand. That's how power moves. Not loudly, not with dramatic speeches, but with stillness, with restraint, with a look that says more than 1,000 words. You become the question mark that others can't stop circling, the pause in the sentence they thought they finished, the unresolved tension in their narrative. You are the silence that makes them squirm. Let's crush the final illusion, now the lie that your reputation must be good to be effective. It's one of the oldest traps in the social game. Most people spend their lives trying to be seen as agreeable, humble, well-intentioned. They want a reputation that glows with kindness and credibility. But Machiavelli would laugh at this. Because in the real world, it's not the good man who wins, it's the strong one. And strength doesn't always look clean. It doesn't always look friendly. The man with a good reputation is expected to act like a people pleaser, to explain himself, to apologize, to maintain the illusion of purity. But the man with a strong reputation, he doesn't owe you an explanation. He doesn't soften his edges. He walks into a room and the energy shifts, not because he's likable, but because no one wants to be on the wrong side of him. That's the result of years of choosing stillness over defense, restraint over rebuttal, aura over argument. You don't build it by reacting. You build it by becoming someone people have to guess about. And that's the secret, not being known, but being wondered about. Every time someone accuses you and you don't respond, you're feeding the myth. You're growing the shadow. Because silence is not the absence of voice, it's the presence of control. And the more you resist the urge to clarify, the more others start to create stories about who you are. And those stories, they always trend toward power. This is how your enemies collapse. Not through direct confrontation, but through obsession. They start talking about you to others. They replay old conversations. They post more hoping you'll engage, but you won't. Because you're not in the game they think they're playing. You've moved beyond the court of public approval. You don't sit on trial anymore, you sit in observation. And when the room grows quiet, your name still echoes. It's subtle, it's slow, but it's absolute. One refusal to explain at a time, you rise. And here's where it gets surgical. When someone provokes you, let's say with a passive-aggressive remark, a pointed insult, or an online call-out, you've got a few final tools that close the loop. These are not clever replies. They are tactical closers. Each one ends the moment. Each one leaves no room for debate. Try noted. Okay, think what you like, time will tell. These aren't sarcastic. They're serene. They slam the door without slamming it in someone's face. You leave the conversation without a trace of emotional residue. And that stillness, that's what shakes people. Because now they have nothing to push against. It also changes how you move. You start paying attention to your face, your posture, your gaze. You stop twitching when someone mentions your name. You stop laughing nervously when tension rises. You hold your body like you hold your words steady, quiet, intentional. And when people can't provoke you physically, emotionally, or verbally, they start to fear you. Not because you're violent, not because you're cruel, but because they don't know what you'll do next. That unreadability makes you dangerous. It makes you powerful. This is what Machiavelli meant when he said, "The most dangerous man is not the one who attacks first. It's the one who never needs to." Because when you no longer fight back, when you no longer defend, people realize something terrifying: they can't reach you. You become immune. And that's different from being strong. Strength still takes hits. Strength still bleeds. Immunity doesn't even register the wound. And when you become immune to accusation, something strange happens. The attacks stop. People stop coming for you not because you won, but because they know they'll lose. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a slow, psychological death by silence. They'll exhaust themselves trying to get a rise from you. And when it doesn't come, they'll fade. They'll fold. You don't defend, you don't explain, you don't perform, and suddenly, they do. They perform your strength for you. Because here's the paradox. Machiavelli understood better than anyone: the more you explain yourself, the more alone you seem. You stand in the middle of a crowd arguing your case, and no one feels the need to help you because you're already helping yourself. But the moment you fall silent, the moment you absorb the attack without breaking, that's when others step in. That's when someone says, "Hey, that wasn't necessary. That's not fair." He didn't even respond. "Why are you still pushing this?" And just like that, the crowd becomes your shield. Your stillness invites their motion. Your restraint becomes your armor. And this is the final evolution. Your silence doesn't just protect you, it attracts defenders. You didn't ask, you didn't beg. But now you're not just respected, you're elevated. You walk different, you speak less, you command more, because everything you do says, "I'm not here to argue, I am here to be." So start today, one move at a time. The next time someone tries to provoke you with an insult, don't explain. Let it hang, let it float, let it evaporate, and watch how much more powerful you feel in the silence. Let them wonder, let them squirm, let them speak your strength while trying to tear you down. Because you don't need to fight for your place, you define it. With every word you don't say,